It was a typical Monday morning at Westview High School when Sarah Mitchell, a quiet and studious senior, walked into her advanced calculus class, unaware that her life was about to unravel in ways she could never have imagined. Known for her diligence and consistent A grades, Sarah was the kind of student teachers praised and peers envied. But that day, her world turned upside down when her teacher, Mrs. Hargrove, accused her of cheating on a major exam, an accusation that would lead to a chain of events exposing a truth so astonishing it left the entire school reeling. Sarah had always been a model student. She wasn't the loudest in class, nor did she crave attention, but her work spoke for itself. Her assignments were meticulous, her test scores impeccable, and her dedication to learning was evident to anyone who knew her. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she carried the weight of her family's hopes on her shoulders. Her parents, both hardworking but not highly educated, saw Sarah's academic success as her ticket to a better life. She spent countless nights studying, often sacrificing social outings to ensure she stayed at the top of her class. Calculus, in particular, was her strength. She loved the logic of it, the way numbers and equations unfolded like a puzzle, each step leading to a clear solution. So, when Mrs. Hargrove, a stern and seasoned teacher with a reputation for being unyielding, handed back the latest exam with a failing grade and a bold red note that read "See me after class," Sarah's heart sank. The accusation came like a bolt from the blue. Mrs. Hargrove, standing at the front of the classroom, held Sarah's exam paper aloft, her voice sharp as she addressed the class. "Academic integrity is the foundation of this institution," she declared, her eyes locking onto Sarah. "Cheating undermines everything we stand for." Sarah's classmates turned to her, their whispers filling the room like static. She felt her face flush, her palms sweating as she tried to process what was happening. After class, Mrs. Hargrove didn't mince words. She pointed to Sarah's exam, which had scored a perfect 100, and claimed it was impossible for her to have achieved such a result without illicit help. The teacher cited similarities between Sarah's answers and those of another student, Ethan Carter, a known high achiever who sat 2 rows away. "The patterns are undeniable," Mrs. Hargrove said, her tone icy. "Identical solutions, even down to the same unconventional method for solving problem 6. You either explain yourself, or I'm reporting this to the principal." Sarah was stunned. She had spent hours preparing for that exam, working through practice problems late into the night. She hadn't even glanced at Ethan's paper during the test, let alone collaborated with him. Ethan was a friendly enough classmate, but they rarely spoke outside of group projects. The idea that their answers could be so similar seemed like a cruel coincidence. "I didn't cheat," Sarah insisted, her voice trembling but firm. "I studied for weeks. I can explain every step of my work." Mrs. Hargrove, however, was unmoved. She demanded proof of Sarah's preparation, something Sarah couldn't produce on the spot. No one kept their scratch paper from weeks of studying. The teacher's skepticism only deepened, and she informed Sarah that the matter would be escalated to the school's academic integrity board. The news spread like wildfire. By lunch, the entire school seemed to know about Sarah's alleged cheating. Whispers followed her in the hallways, and some of her peers openly questioned how someone like her, quiet, unassuming, could have pulled off perfect scores without bending the rules. Her best friend, Maya, stood by her, but even Maya admitted the situation looked bad. "How do you explain the identical answers?" she asked gently. Sarah didn't have an answer, not yet. She felt betrayed by the system she'd worked so hard to excel in, and the weight of the accusation threatened to crush her. Her parents, when she told them that evening, were devastated. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, and her father, usually stoic, clenched his fists in frustration. "We've always trusted you, Sarah," he said. "But you need to fight this. You can't let them ruin your reputation." The Academic Integrity Board hearing was scheduled for the following week, giving Sarah 7 days to prepare her defense. She spent every waking moment retracing her steps, trying to understand how her exam could have matched Ethan's so closely. She reviewed her study habits, her notes, and even the textbook they used, searching for any clue that might explain the overlap. Meanwhile, the school's rumor mill churned. Some students claimed Sarah had always been too perfect, suggesting she'd been cheating all along. Others speculated that Ethan, who was popular and charismatic, might have been the one to copy her work, but no one dared accuse him directly. Ethan himself remained silent on the matter, avoiding Sarah in the hallways and offering vague responses when questioned by classmates. As the hearing approached, Sarah's anxiety grew. The Academic Integrity Board consisted of 3 teachers, the principal, and a student representative, and their decision could have serious consequences. A cheating conviction could mean a failing grade for the semester, a mark on her permanent record, and even the loss of her college acceptances. She had already been accepted to a prestigious university with a partial scholarship, and the thought of losing it was unbearable. Determined to clear her name, Sarah reached out to Ethan, hoping he might shed light on the situation. She found him after school in the library, where he was studying alone. "Ethan, I need to know what happened," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Did you see my paper during the exam? Did something happen I don't know about?" Ethan looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting away. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah," he said. "I just did my test. Maybe we studied from the same sources or something." His evasiveness only deepened her suspicions, but she had no proof. The day of the hearing arrived, and the small conference room felt suffocating. Sarah sat at a table facing the board, her parents by her side. Mrs. Hargrove presented her case first, laying out the evidence, the identical answers, the shared method for problem 6, and the statistical improbability of 2 students producing such similar work independently. She emphasized Ethan's strong academic record, implying that Sarah, as the less likely candidate for a perfect score, must have been the one to cheat. Sarah's heart pounded as she listened, but she refused to let fear silence her. When it was her turn to speak, she stood up, her voice clear and resolute. "I've worked hard for every grade I've ever earned," she said. "I didn't cheat, and I can walk you through every problem on that exam to prove it." She proceeded to explain her solutions, step by step, demonstrating not only her understanding but also her unique approach to the problems. The board listened intently, but their expressions gave nothing away. Then came the moment that changed everything. The student representative, a junior named Lila who had been quiet throughout the hearing, raised her hand. "I have something to add," she said hesitantly. All eyes turned to her. Lila explained that she had been seated behind Sarah and Ethan during the exam and had noticed something unusual. "Ethan kept looking over at Sarah's desk," she said. "I didn't think much of it at the time, but it happened multiple times. I could see his eyes moving toward her paper." The room fell silent. Mrs. Hargrove's face tightened, and the principal leaned forward, asking Lila to elaborate. Lila described how Ethan had shifted in his seat, angling his body to get a better view of Sarah's desk. She hadn't reported it earlier because she didn't want to get involved, but seeing Sarah face such serious consequences compelled her to speak up. The board called Ethan into the room. When confronted with Lila's account, he grew visibly nervous. "That's not true," he stammered. "I was just looking around. I didn't copy anything." But under the board's probing questions, his story began to crumble. He couldn't explain why his method for problem 6, a method he admitted he'd never used before, matched Sarah's exactly. Finally, he broke. "Okay, fine," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I glanced at her paper. I was stuck on a couple of problems, and I saw her answers. I didn't mean for it to go this far." The room erupted in gasps. Sarah felt a wave of relief, but it was tinged with anger. Ethan's actions had nearly cost her everything, and his casual admission only underscored how little he'd considered the consequences. The board deliberated for what felt like an eternity. In the end, they ruled in Sarah's favor, clearing her of all charges. Ethan, however, faced serious repercussions. A failing grade for the exam, a suspension, and a mandatory meeting with his parents and the principal. Mrs. Hargrove, visibly shaken, apologized to Sarah after the hearing. "I was wrong to jump to conclusions," she said. "Your work has always been exceptional, and I should have trusted that." Sarah nodded, accepting the apology, but the sting of the accusation lingered. The school issued a statement clarifying the outcome, and while it quelled some of the rumors, Sarah knew it would take time for her reputation to fully recover. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's story became a topic of discussion not just at Westview but in the wider community. Parents and students alike debated the pressures of academic competition and the importance of fairness in judging students. Sarah, meanwhile, focused on moving forward. She threw herself back into her studies, determined to prove that her success was no fluke. Her classmates began to see her in a new light, not just as the smart girl but as someone who had faced a false accusation with courage and come out stronger. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled to regain his standing. His admission had tarnished his reputation, and while some felt sympathy for his moment of weakness, others saw it as a betrayal of the trust placed in him.